The desert seemed to hold its breath as the final train of the day slowed to a stop. The station sat lonely at the edge of the sands. A single weather platform, a cracked bench, and a rusted sign nearly swallowed by drifting dunes. Beneath the fading light, a woman sat quietly, her shawl pulled close to her face to guard against the dry wind. Her name was Ishta. She had nowhere else to go. Travelers came and went without a word. Some glanced her way, curious or cautious, but no one stayed long enough to truly see her. She had learned that silence kept her safe, safer than any apology ever could. Once, when a stranger asked where she was headed, she had answered, "I'm waiting for what doesn't come." The words had tasted bitter, but they were easier than admitting she had already lost everything that could be taken without losing her life. That evening, she thought of her father's voice, the sound right before the gunfire, and of her mother's hands that always smelled of cedar. The wind carried that same scent now, or perhaps it was only her longing pretending to be memory. Once her world had been small, full of faces and songs. Now it was only dust, wood, and silence. A shadow fell across her boots. A man had arrived without a sound, his coat torn by weather, the brim of his hat hiding his eyes. He moved like someone who had long been alone. His steps were unhurried. Ishta didn't look up. She learned that meeting a stranger's gaze could invite cruelty. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice low, steady, almost gentle. She moved slightly, making space. He sat beside her with a quiet grace, unscrewed the lid of his canteen, took a sip, then offered it to her. "It's clean," he said simply. She hesitated, then took it. The water was warm, but it was good, a small act of mercy. "Thank you," she whispered, surprised at the sound of her own gratitude. He nodded. "Name's Wap," he said after a pause, as though to the wind more than to her. "Ishta," she replied softly. That was enough. From the doorway, the woman who ran the station, Martha Jane, watched them. "That girl's been sitting there 3 days," she murmured to the sheriff beside her. "Now she's got company," he said, chewing on a toothpick. "People will talk," the sheriff warned. "They always do," Martha sighed. Ishta felt the weight of their stares even from afar. She knew how suspicion moved, how people saw her skin before her face, her silence before her story. She rose, pulling her old satchel close, but the strap broke, spilling everything. A comb, a few coins, a piece of beadwork faded with age. Before she could bend to gather them, Wap crouched down. He picked up each item gently. His hand lingered on the beadwork. "This means something," he said quietly. "My mother made it," she answered. Without a word, he took a piece of leather from his pocket and repaired the strap. His hands were careful, practiced. When he handed it back, she finally met his eyes, gray like river stones, calm and unshaken. "Why help me?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because I can." Something within her softened, a feeling she hadn't known in years. That night, they camped near the tracks. The fire was small, the stars sharp and cold. After long silence, Wap asked, "Where were you headed?" "Anywhere but here," she said, half smiling. He gave a quiet laugh that sounded like sorrow. "Then we're going the same way." She hesitated, unsure if he was mocking her, but his face remained gentle. "I lost my family," she said suddenly, "because I stayed when I should have run." "I lost mine because I ran when I should have stayed," he replied. Between them, silence grew, not heavy but understanding. The sparks rose into the night like unspoken prayers. At dawn, the sheriff returned on horseback. "You planning to stay here, Cowboy?" he asked coldly. "Just resting," Wap said calmly. "This town doesn't need trouble." "Didn't bring any," Wap answered. The sheriff's eyes flicked toward Ishta. She felt the familiar sting of judgment. Before she could step aside, Wap moved, standing between her and that gaze. "Kindness doesn't ask permission," he said evenly. The sheriff spat in the dust, muttered something about fools, and rode away. When he was gone, Ishta whispered, "Why did you stand for me?" "Because no one stood for me," he said, and that was all. In the days that followed, they stayed near the station, helping Martha mend fences and repair the roof. She paid them with food and quiet companionship. Wap never said much, but his silence spoke clearly, setting out 2 plates at every meal, turning away politely when she braided her hair, treating every creature with gentle respect. For the first time in years, Ishta found herself humming. It startled her, the sound of her own peace returning. One evening, as the train roared past and vanished in the desert, Wap handed her a small loop of twine. "For you," he said. She turned it over in her hand. "What is it?" "Something that doesn't promise too much," he replied. "Just that I'll stay as long as you do." Her throat tightened. She tied the twine around her wrist. "Then stay," she said softly. Days later, another train arrived. The conductor called her name. Someone long ago had bought her a ticket. She stood before the open door, staring at her reflection in the window. The same eyes, but a different woman. "I'm tired of running," she said. He nodded, understanding without words. They walked back down the platform, hand brushing hand, the twine catching sunlight. Behind them, the train left without them. Weeks later, Martha Jane braided wildflowers into Ishta's hair. There was no preacher, no vows, only 2 people standing beneath a sky that smelled of rain. When Wap took her hand, he whispered her name like a promise. The first drops began to fall, soft and grateful. Years passed. The station vanished to dust, but travelers still spoke of a house near the desert's edge, where a woman had once waited and a man had stayed. On the gatepost, someone had carved a single phrase, "Kindness needs no witness." And when their story was retold, old and softened by time, Wap's voice would always return to it. "She once told me no one marries a native woman," he'd say quietly. "But the world doesn't know what love looks like until it's seen her face in firelight." When listeners asked what came after, he would smile faintly and answer, "After that, we stayed. That was all there ever was to do." And the desert wind, patient and eternal, would carry the last of their story into the wide, forgiving sky.